We started in 2005 with this project, and it's one of our more iconic museums we designed in a whole range of projects we designed the last 40 years. Because normally when you realize a building, you take out urban square by building a building. And here we built a building and we added more urban space. And I think that's one of the successes of the museum, facing to the museum square. You can see the section. You can see in the volume, and you will probably understand why it's called bathtub. We deliberately designed it this way to make the contrast as big as possible between the new building and the old one. It was for the State Museum very important that they could show the world that they are again, they have a new period in their history.
And he says, you know, Rotterdam North, we have to talk about our relationship. It's toxic. It's now, I know it's a cliche, but I want you to love me for who I am, and not for who you want me to be. And to be honest, I don't really know who I am anymore. I think I need some time alone. Because we want to think about this area, about South. And also with all this young population, from their perspective. They don't want to be stigmatized. And everything you do for us, without us, we do against us. So, with the Van Ede Institute, one team, we took this area as a subject. Because I also wanted to know their opinion. Okay, I explained again the whole story about the history and that harbors are man-made for people. The economy, it's an old economy. They said, could we bring back the spirit of a place of exchange in this area? Of goods, of people, of food, what is extremely important. Knowledge, energy, is that possible? And we went to the site and they said, it was even more empty than 2 months ago. Where are the people? It's totally empty. And was also an engineer with us. He said, such a basin, it's even not sustainable because it's not a system of a water system what is natural. The river is something, but the basin is something totally different. And why are these dikes needed if it's not part of your system? And it's taking a lot of space, and you're hiding the people of South behind dikes. That's why they're so disconnected. As I told you, infrastructure grid, it's already there, 2 stations. Reunite with people, with jobs, with education. And it's more love, they said. They were suggesting a hyperlibrary, a local hyperlibrary, and a global, maybe bringing even an education institution, what they did in Central St. Martin's, in King's Cross, and Cornell University in Roosevelt Island. I don't know if it's a good idea, because I think we have good Dutch education, and we made a map. We brought back the market, we suggested a hyperlibrary and educational institutions. We think the dike and the whole water system. That was our one-day workshop. Now I go back to the national debate. It was even on television this Sunday. I think you are here or not? You ask, and you want to build in the green to get 1 million houses. 1 million homes needed in the Netherlands. A demolition of 20,000 homes in Rotterdam. Transition of using gas. Energy transition of the port, what is a big thing. We need people with technical skills. All these young people of Rotterdam South, they are totally needed for the economy. We need people with care skills. We need less disturbing dikes, a new vision on water management. Make a plan for this area, please, and really think about what these harbors mean for the people. Bring North and South together. Develop, there are an enormous amount of square meters over there. What you can use. Bring people in it. Housing, culture, schools. Don't think first bridges and infrastructure. Think first people. Bring them together. And also people of South should be connected to the river, not behind harbors and dikes.
And what I learned from them, and especially from Mariek, is that there are a couple of things very important to get a successful area development. First of all, there is a need of urgency. You have to work with people, they're really interested for the new mindset. If it's not, don't start. So there has to be a common interest for a longing for a new story of the area. Second one, very important, trust between public, private and society. Without, you can't build on a great area. Social return, especially for today's topic. It was very concerned about social return because you're going to build in the south part of Rotterdam, and we heard already there's a lot of unemployment, and it's not that the new building things are giving more employment to people who are related to the building business, but also for housekeeping, etc., but also education. It was a great part for in that moment for making the plans. And of course, urban design, architecture is important. The quality of how it looks, to be proud of. You all know the story about the Erasmus Bridge. The Erasmus Bridge is not only important for the south part of the Netherlands, it's iconic for the whole city of Rotterdam and even international well known.
So Zoku is a new category in the hotel industry. It's a hybrid between a home and an office, topped with hotel services, and then combined with a kind of a social structure, nice, thriving neighborhood. There's one thing that always came back is that if you stay in the city, you don't speak the language, you don't have your friends over there, you start to feel disconnected after a few days, weeks. And this was the biggest problem we wanted to solve. And so the first thing we want to do is to create social spaces where people can interact easily. But in hotels, we are very good at creating barriers between staff and guests. So we have big reception desks with closed-up bars, with restaurants where you never see some kind of chef. So we open up everything in the social spaces in Zoku to facilitate effortless connections. That people always can stand next to a person instead of opposite the person. And it creates a very informal atmosphere. So with the social spaces, here you don't see a big reception desk anymore. You can go everywhere. And it's actually, what happens there is that people start to know each other very easily. We got a living room, we got a bar, we got a living kitchen, you can cook in your own apartment, which I will show briefly in a minute. We got co-working spaces, and all those different worlds are intermingled and connected.
But increasingly, transport is also seen as unlocking other outcomes. Certainly in the UK, and I think it's the same in the Netherlands, some comments that have been raised this afternoon, we have a major issue around housing supply. We are not building enough homes. We haven't built enough homes in the UK for many years now, which means there is an affordability issue, but there's also a lack of supply of housing of all types. Affordable housing, but all housing. And transport projects are increasingly seen as mechanisms for unlocking that growth. This is an image of the former Battersea Power Station in South London, famous for the Pink Floyd album cover, if anyone's old enough to remember that. And this is an example where transport has been focused entirely on unlocking development, jobs and homes. So interestingly, Transport for London, which is the transport authority in London where I used to work, now has a target from the mayor to deliver housing. It has to deliver 10,000 homes in a mayoral term in 4 years, which has taken TfL into being one of the largest housing developers in London. And that is because transport land, the opportunity around stations, the opportunity to reuse that infrastructure differently, to reimagine it, is an opportunity for delivering housing.
The following is happening, that everyone thinks that the online providers are actually winning, we call it the battle, the online battle. But the reality is that the online battle is won by the retailers. And when you read all of those studies you're getting, I'm quite amused when I was reading it, because a lot of smart people from agency business, etc., are telling you that it's clearly fashion is losing out and convenience and food is doing good, and actually it's the other way around. The biggest format which is hit by the disruption through online are actually the hypermarkets. Luckily you don't have them in the Netherlands that much, which was actually smart and forward thinking. But the reality was that the hypermarkets all around Europe are living from the non-food offer, and this non-food offer is heavily hit by online and by other retailers like TK Maxx and Primark, which I think is easily understandable. So they're scaling down, and if you see the expansion of the big food operators in Europe, it's basically happening what we have here in the Netherlands, like those Albert Heijn convenience neighborhood stores, on 150 to 300 square meters. And this is happening with Rewe in Germany, with Albert Heijn here, with Carrefour Express in Italy. It's happening all around. And why? Because your patterns have changed. People are not going anymore to a hypermarket to buy food, to put it in the fridge for 2 weeks, because people have different lives, they travel, the jobs are more demanding, you know, and simply no one is basically keeping the stuff in the fridge to be rotting away there for 2 weeks or whatever. So what do? You go to the convenience Albert Heijn, you buy 15 euros for tonight, and you buy 19 euros tomorrow for tomorrow, and more and more people have this pattern, and not only in the Netherlands, but in Poland and a lot of other European countries. So this is the dramatic change. While the fashion retailers actually are, regarding market share, the winners of the online battle, because they're starting to use clicks and bricks. But they have one problem. The problem they have is that they're replacing 25% plus margin euro in stationary retail with a minus 25% euro in online. Because I will tell you a little secret, no one is until now really earning money online. Only a few of them, and if you ask who these few are, these are guys who, for example, in wholesale have already 1,600 sales points around the US, so everybody knows the brand, so they can play again clicks and bricks together. But purely in online, no one really earns money. And the problem the retailers have with this, they don't have the logistic around the planet for doing what they're doing. So when you speak with Inditex, for example, Zara, a brand a lot of you know, is when a good is ordered in China online, and then it's returned back and it's free of charge logistics to return it back, the good is basically shipped from Europe to China, to the storage. There is no net of logistics still for the brands all around the planet, and neither the brands have the financial means to establish this network all around the planet. So for them, it's a journey into the unknown. They have to play this game, they have to be present in online, but actually they're giving up profits to get market share in online. So it sounds, to the outside, the growth in online sounds much nicer, and they're selling it much nicer than they feel internally about it.
It's so important to understand how consumers react, how they act, what is important to them. And in order to understand that we are in a new way of thinking, a new paradigm, it can be useful to look back, just like with the traffic. Before it was tradition and heritage, you do what you're told to do. Then it was effectiveness in systems, you do it if everybody else does it. But now it's all about being relevant and building relations. If I like it, I will come. And even though, of course, a lot of people in the industry are moving towards it's such a huge shift. This has nothing to do with architecture, building relations. It's about making the frames. It's about being relevant. And many times when I'm standing in front of a store and I'm looking and I'm saying, what do they do to try to create a relationship with me? Why are they relevant? What do they do to create the retail offer so I understand why I need to buy another dress? Because you're absolutely right about that too. We say that about 80% of the turnover in the stores are not because of physical needs, but it's psychological needs.
Now, this pattern of rising density, of the success of density, the triumph of the city, if you will, right, is a general pattern, which you can see in a variety of different outcomes. So what I've done here is I've taken the 3,000-odd counties in the United States, and I've divided them up on the basis of their density levels. Because at their heart, cities are the absence of physical space between people. Cities are density, proximity, closeness. What you see in the top line is the relationship between density and earnings. The densest 10th of America's counties have earnings that are 50% higher than the least dense half of America's counties. This is something economists call agglomeration economies, and they've gotten stronger over time. The fact that we become productive when we are tossed into a maelstrom of economic activity. Right? The bottom line is somewhat more surprising, which is the relationship between population growth. And keep in mind, this is migration, not extra fertility. Okay? The relationship between population growth and density. So the places that started being the most crowded have only gotten more crowded over time. Whereas Americans at the start of the 19th century were leaving their dense enclaves on the eastern seaboard to populate the empty spaces between the oceans. At the start of the 21st century, instead of spreading out, we're clustering in. These are the same two graphs for the EU. Okay? These are the 1114 NUTS 3 regions, which are sort of comparable to counties. The top line shows the relationship between income and density. This is significantly stronger within the EU than it is within the US. The densest NUTS 3 regions are twice as productive, have twice as high incomes as the least dense NUTS 3 regions. The population growth relationship is bumpier and weaker, partially reflecting the fact that Americans have at least traditionally moved around on a dime, whereas to get a single Sienese to move from one neighborhood to another is an impossibility, right, for most Italians, right? So it's a much more mobile continent. But you still see this general health of dense areas versus less dense areas. Cities have always been about the exchange of ideas. They've always been about places where we get smart by being around other smart people. One of the things we notice in the wage data is that people who come to cities don't experience a 30% wage gain overnight. What they see is day by day, month by month, they experience faster wage gains. Okay? Cities are places where we get smart by being around other smart people. What the past 40 years for technology has been is that it has radically increased the returns to being smart, radically increased the returns to innovation, and cities are where we get smart. And this is what changed. This is why cities have high education industries, and this is why highly educated cities have done well. If you thought that any industry all over the world should be able to send people home and make them work long distance, it should be Google, and yet that's the last thing that they do. They bring people together, they tear down walls, they build up connections. This is what cities do that matter. 130 years ago, the English economist Alfred Marshall said that, in dense clusters, the mysteries of the trade become no mystery, but are, as it were, in the air. That in a world in which the returns to skill have skyrocketed, this is what cities do best, this is what cities do that matters. And anyone who's ever taught knows, right? The more complicated the idea, the more valuable it is to be face-to-face, right? Anyone who's ever taught realizes that the hardest part about teaching is not knowing your subject material. It's knowing whether or not anything you're saying is getting through at all to your students, right? We have these wonderful cues for communicating comprehension or confusion. They're lost when we're not in the same room with one another. That's why if you have something complicated or sensitive, you say it face-to-face. And as the world becomes more complicated, cities aren't going away. What does that mean for Amsterdam? What does that mean for Europe's most beautiful urban cores? It means that you've got to preserve this, but in order to preserve this, you've got to figure out somewhere to build. Now, that's not that hard, but you have to get some areas where you're willing to put a really high FAR. So if you want to put 1 million households, which is what some of the people, some of the estimates require, you want to put 1 million new housing units, at 100 square meters per unit, you need 100 square kilometers of space. That's not that hard in FAR 10. You can put that on a circle with a 1.8 kilometer radius, but you need to be willing to put it in FAR 10. If you need an FAR 5, you need to double the amount of space. But it's not saying you obviously don't want skyscrapers here, but you want to figure out some place, a La Défense for Amsterdam, where you're willing to put tall buildings where people actually want to live. And I don't see any other way to promote affordability that doesn't involve some degree of allowing there to be more building up.
The question now obviously is, where do we want these dwellings to be built? And then it is really important to get this argument right. Do we have to understand your book in such a way that we need to build close to the places where that proximity is on offer? Or is it actually in the Netherlands and in other European contexts very different, because we have the advantage of very well-connected polycentric cities that allow us to travel? So for instance, do we need to live close to the Zuidas, because walkability, the big point also in the book, has an asset in itself, which is true of course for Manhattan? Or is it in the Netherlands different, namely that people who are very rich often live in Aardenhout or in Wassenaar, have no problems whatsoever to get to the Zuidas, profit from the proximity there, and then at the same time profit from the delightful opportunities of living on the shore of the North Sea in wonderful cities like The Hague.
So yes, you have a hell of a lot to think about. I wish you a very, very good evening. Enjoy yourselves. You go downstairs now, have a look around, have a drink, and then I think everything kicks off at 7:15. Is that right? And then there's the award ceremony and so on and so on. So be safe, have a good evening. See you perhaps again the next time.